Hi, I'm Mark Sumner, CEO and founder of Robertson Sumner. Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast, where we will share learnings, best practices and failures with some of the biggest names in the IT industry. Today I had the privilege of meeting the CEO of Ultima, Scott Dodds, in the Channel Chat studio. We talked about his career, starting within distribution in inside sales, all the way to where he is today. We also discussed the way Ultima are differentiating themselves in the market by using automation to help themselves and their customers be more efficient. So sit back, listen and enjoy. Hello, I'm Mark Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the privilege of having Scott Dodds, the CEO of Ultima, in the house. How are you doing, Scott?
Hi Mark, good to see you. Thanks for the invite.
No, thanks for coming in. So Scott, obviously the first thing I always ask everyone who comes on the show is why they came into the industry, and then how did you actually get into the industry itself?
Yeah, that's a long time ago now for me. That's almost 35 plus years, unfortunately. So one of the things I start with when I do my inductions of my own teams is I talk about how I started in the industry before the PC arrived. It kind of blows their minds.
Yeah.
But the bit that goes even further in blowing their mind is that I started working with Apple when I first got into it, and they can't get their heads around that Apple came before the PC and DOS and Microsoft and everything else. So I got way back into those days. My interest sparked. My dad was in IBM in the 60s and 70s, and so we were always in a kind of a tech-ish environment in those days. And so it was just one of those things that kind of stuck with me, and it was always an interest of something I wanted to do. So I got into the industry very early days into the distribution world. So I started working with a company called Rapid Recall back in the day. I know you've had Nigel Dunn on here. Nigel and I go back all the way back to the Rapid Recall days. And that was working on digital equipment and actually HP in those days and a whole bunch of other different technologies. And that sort of sparked the interest from there, and I kind of went after that into all sorts of different areas, and I kind of ended up working through a whole bunch of different vendor companies. Way back I joined Compaq back in the early days of Compaq, and then I moved into Acer, became an MD, and we'll talk about that later in there after being sales director, and then moved into Microsoft after that. I was in Microsoft for about 11 years with various roles, including ending up in Western Europe. Then joined VMware for a while, and then I came to Ultima about 4 years ago. So a long history in technology companies, and have seen enormous change. It's incredible what's happened in that time. Well, you can imagine. I mean, the other thing I tell them is that when I started selling on the road back in the day, we were issued with bags of 10p's at the start of every week, so we could phone back to the office.
Oh God!
So there was
there
were no mobile phones. Yeah, absolutely. We had to find phone boxes in the city and everything else, and call back to our sales
that seems
teams.
Crazy now, seeing that, isn't it?
It's almost unbelievable.
It's unheard of.
So and most of the stuff that I worked on in those days is in museums now, which is even more scary. So it's been quite a ride for 30 odd years.
I was going to say, do you think you started obviously in distribution? Do you think that's the ideal place for someone to start their career in the channel? Because I noticed that a lot of leaders do start in distribution. They end up sort of working their way up through the channel. But if you were going to start again, where would you start in the channel?
I guess it could, a number of different answers to that. I think when I started, there was no channel really. We were creating it back in the day. I mean, I think, as I said to you, we started before IBM, the PC-1 arrived, and so the channel was just being formed in those days. It's where the birth of Computer Center, personal computers, lots of other names from those days grew up. And I think so there wasn't really many other choices, and I think I was involved in setting up a distribution model, as it were, in the early days, because they didn't exist, and we had to go and find partners to go and work with. I think now I would come in and probably look more at, and I'll come back to why I've moved into a partner rather than a vendor, because I think that there's more innovation happening, or potential innovation happening at the partner level now than there has ever been, because of the way the technology is moving and the way that the world is moving with cloud and all these other things. It kind of enables us to bring a whole basket of technology together and do some really clever and innovative things. And that's really what the excitement is about. I don't think running a playbook that just sells something or manages something that doesn't change very often is very exciting. So I think it's something about adding that, doing new things and creating and being an innovator nowadays is what I would look for if I was coming into the market now.
So in your career then, so you obviously started, you said rapid recall.
Yeah.
Was it as a sales role? Was that what you did?
Yeah. Inside sales.
Inside sales. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it started. Great training actually in those days. I mean, proper sales training with proper sales managers that would sit on you and a number of calls and all that stuff. But those are just great learnings. A lot of cold calling, which is pretty horrific for most people, but a lot of learning how to do that, and basically just going through the whole process of understanding the sales cycle. I think. And that's where it started. Then it went into field management and all those things. And I guess one of the things that drove me always was how I could continue to learn. And that'll be a theme I guess we'll talk about later. But, I wanted to be able to, for whatever reason, I had a desire to be a general manager, right? Or own my own company or run a company or do something. And I think... And
that was very early on?
Very early on.
Right.
And I don't know why, what was in it for me really. I guess I just wanted, maybe it was a control thing, I don't know. But actually, I made a decision very early on that I wanted to learn lots of different roles, because how could I manage a company if I didn't understand all the different components of that company? And so, I mean, actually, I've missed one out. I started my career actually before Rapid Recall. I started in a company called Fletcher Dennis Systems. Fletcher Dennis Systems was one of the very first resellers in the UK. That's where it started with Apple and other things. And I was in everywhere from, it was a small company growing rapidly. I was doing everything from, purchase ledger through to technical support through to, that's how it worked in those days. But I guess I got a flavour for that in those days, that I wanted to be involved in more components of the business and have an understanding of that. Sales was an obvious extension of that, but then, management and, wider understanding of other departments. So that was kind of a drive for me. That's always been a drive. So whether we continue to learn or not is the key, I think.
So when you got your first opportunity into your management, that was something you wanted to do naturally because you wanted to grow and learn anyway.
I thought I did. I mean, I don't think you ever know until you get into it whether it's going to be right for you. I mean, the classic, you must see this all the time, classic, your best salespeople or your best whatever are not necessarily your best managers.
Yeah. Normally they're not.
Normally they're not.
It's not
right?
Even sometimes. I would say 70-80% of the time they're definitely not the best person.
So I was okay as a manager, so I must have been really poor as a salesperson.
Yeah.
So that's probably true.
Bad salesperson has put me into management.
Exactly. That's where I came from. So I think there was an element of that, but I think it was again a desire to want to grow and learn how to a business worked and what does it mean to have your own people. I guess ultimately the drive for me was to have my own business, which I did in the early part of the 90s. I set up a company up with a couple of colleagues, and it was a kind of very early resellery thing. It was a bit odd actually. It was a company called Route to Market, and it was selling software from a CD. And unfortunately, in those days, there were no CDs on PCs. That's how long ago it was. And in fact, you've had one of my cohorts on this podcast, Nigel Dunn, who's now at Jabra, really good mate of mine, great guy. And he and I and a couple others set a business up to go and sell software on the Sun platform, on the front. And we put a CD, we built the CD, put it on the front of the Sun user magazine, and it was shipped out to 30,000 Sun users. And we sold software from it, which is kind of the early forerunner to the internet because it didn't really exist then. But we learned that, and we ran that for a year or two, and it was great learning. And we had investment from a distributor, and we had other things. And eventually, the model just was too hard, and we ended up having to sell hardware and stuff, and it just changed the business model. But I learned so much in that year or two just about what it takes to start something from scratch. I drove trucks down with the guys down to Wales to get the CDs picked up and built, and it was crazy, right? You almost couldn't imagine doing it now, but I learned an awful lot from that, and then I kind of translated that from my next steps into vendor land all the way through about what does it take to be a partner, and it's hard. It's really hard. And so, that was a kind of an empathy thing that I think everyone should have. So experience of lots of different things was the key. I think that was always a driver for me, to do lots of different things and not get stuck in one particular area, one particular avenue. Did you then,
obviously into management, what was your sort of first sales director gig?
First proper sales director gig was Acer. So I was actually employed by Dion Weisler, who ended up being worldwide CEO of HP Inc. So he did very well. He went off. He was in the UK running Acer for a few years. He brought me into sales director, and then he went back to Australia or I can't remember who he joined now. Was it Lenovo or somebody? And I took over as MD from that point. So, but the sales director role fully started in the Acer days. That was a channels role as well, working with channel partners and working with distributors and vendors and all that stuff. So it was that was a good learning for me, and I kind of got a taste for doing more of it. And then moved in after Acer, moved into my.
And when you were obviously MD, did you think, was that the first MD role? What was the biggest challenge you were running Acer as the MD?
Well, it was a subsidiary MD, so it was, we're working in a big global organisation, so it was sitting on European management teams, understanding how that all operated, the politics of big companies, running your own P&L end to end, all the issues of costs of running the business and managing people and all those things. So yeah, it just brought another dimension to it. But it was an MD of a subsidiary rather than the full blown operation. So there was a lot of other things to learn in that space. But it was again great times. I mean, there was lots of early 2000s, lots going on. End of the 90s, early 2000s, some massive growth areas and some new things. Learning in both retail and consumer and business on B2B. So yeah, lots of different things. But I guess I never thought of it as an MD role. Never thought of it as a seller. I just thought of it as a manager that was trying to do the right thing and bring the people with me. I think I learned very early on that you're only as good as your team. So that's an important lesson for every manager, is that your team is the thing that makes you successful, not you. And that stuff was kind of burnt in very early for me, I think.
Great. And then you went obviously into Microsoft. Tell me about your career there.
So I joined Microsoft initially to the OEM business, and because my history was in Compaq and Acer, who were huge, obviously, OEMs for Microsoft. So it was a kind of natural, easier step for me to get into that, and of course that a huge organisation, massively challenged and growing actually through that period in the mid 2000s. And actually, the 10, 11 years I was with Microsoft, there were some big challenges. That was the time when Microsoft was going through this, shall we move to the cloud? Amazon was just starting out and starting to disrupt. Microsoft really didn't have its act together early on with what it was doing with this kind of on-premise behemoth versus the cloud. And wow, how they've changed that around in the last few years, particularly with Satya Nadella's arrival. It's been a dramatic shift. For the good in that company, but yeah, enormous learning potential in that. I keep using this word learning, but it's true. I mean, you get exposed to everything and anything in a company like Microsoft, literally from Xbox and gaming right the way through to the biggest data center opportunity and all those things and everything in between. And it's just an amazing place to learn. Has a lot of challenges, lots of politics, lots of all sorts of crazy things in a big global organization like that. But just amazing place to develop your skills and hone what you want to really do actually. And I think that was another driver for me, was that what was happening inside Microsoft, where it was all going, was also opening my eyes up to the potential of partners like Ultima in the future and what a partner in this channel now can do and will do in the future, which I know we'll come on to. But that was kind of, and 11 years running the partner channels, was COO at the end, also ran marketing, then ran part of Western Europe for what was called SMS&P in those days. So yeah, but great people, working with really, really great people, very talented people, but lots of different types of role and responsibility, which is the key for me.
So let's go to the present role that you're doing now. Obviously, CEO of Ultima.
Yeah.
Now, predominantly, you've had a vendor background.
Yeah.
What made you go back into I know you'd had a touch on a little reseller very early in your career, but it has been a vendor background throughout your career. What made you go into a partner?
I think being in the centre of some of these massive global vendor organisations, you start to see a little bit more about where it's going, where the market's going, what the technology roadmap is doing, and where the direction of travel is. And I think what I was always keen to do, and I knew Ultima from way back. Ultima's been around, 30-year-old company that's grown up in this industry and is now transforming dramatically, which I'll come on to. But But I thought, I saw a company like Ultima as a great platform to innovate with and on top of. And we started to do that. And we'll talk about automation and some of the things that we're doing. But I think in many ways the cloud and the way technology is developing is kind of disaggregating the classical vendor models, because you can bring in lots of different technologies to do what a client or customer needs. And that aggregation can't be done by a single vendor, right? They have to bring in, or we have to bring in, lots of different types of capability and technology, and the cloud enables that to work a lot easier. So I thought the innovation part of the business is going to be much more at the front end of the marketplace, where we as partners and sellers of technology, as it were, can really innovate more than actually the big platform providers can. And they will continue to do that, but we will add that sort of magic dust on top. That's kind of always been the vision for it.
Yeah, because there was a CRN article recently, or maybe not recently actually, where you said automation is the key to the future of our business. So what do you mean by that, by automation?
So, as you know, at the very base level, we believe that the automation is very earliest days now in most companies, and software defined everything, as it were, is going to be driven harder and harder everywhere. Now, I don't think any of us can stop that wave. I mean, we use an analogy of digital rivers, speed of change, how fast these digital rivers, they're being driven by Microsoft and Amazon and Google and all these big global companies. But the speed of that river, as it were, is just accelerating. So one of those areas is about software, how software is managing your infrastructure and managing your business. So automation is a big topic, because it's not going to go away. It's going to be used more and more as a disruptor by everybody coming into whatever industry you're in, because it takes huge amounts of cost out of the business, and it also adds a huge amount of quality and consistency, which is kind of the magic formula. And so when I came into the business 4 years ago now, we spent some time working out how do we use things like RPA, robotic process automation, and we work with Autonomy, which is now called Blue Prism Cloud, has been acquired, and we worked at how do we drop in some of this automation to try and make our business more efficient and more effective. And as we did that, and we were kind of early into that whole cycle 2 or 3 years ago, and it was kind of odd, really, people saying, what are you doing and why are we really doing this? And now that everyone can see where it's going and see where this stuff is starting to really make an impact. And so we took it to our clients as well, and we started to get more involved with RPA. And that led us to thinking about how we automate some more of our core infrastructure services, which has led us to a bunch of software services that we're developing, which is essentially SaaS-like products that we call it Autonomous Cloud, which manages your migration and your management of your Azure infrastructure as you move it. Autonomous Edge is where we do the same for the workspace and the Windows environments, and all those are software led, right? And they've got a layer of really smart people on top of it, but the core infrastructure management is being done by software now, and we believe that's where it has to go, because it's going to get more and more expensive to have more and more people running that. And that'd be true of the network, it'd be true of all sorts of parts of your infrastructure. So that was always a driver for us to do it to ourselves initially. Yeah. How do we get more efficient? How do we take cost out of the business? And then actually, once we've learned that and fallen down the holes and got all the bruises, how do we then take that to our clients? And that's what we started to do. And so we started to develop software as part of our portfolio. We haven't changed our core. We haven't burnt the bridges or burnt the boats as some of the partners in the channel are doing. We're keeping our core, because the core is very important. We put all that 30 years of core infrastructure, architecture, design, smart people, smart systems, smart procurement, everything. We're just layering on intelligent automation on top of that. And there's a lot of really important, powerful stuff in there to be had.
You're in the top 100 VARs, but would you, almost on the back of what you've just said there, would you describe yourself as a reseller, or would you describe yourself more as or going towards more of an aggregator or a software supplier? How would you describe Ultima's the future it's going to be?
The reseller, I mean,
I know you don't like the term reseller.
I don't think it covers what everybody does nowadays. No. It's not just ours; it's everybody. I mean, I think there's way more to it than just supplying some technology. I mean, it still happens, and we all do it, and none of us are walking away from it. Well, some are, but not all of us. And but it's just part of a mix now of capabilities. That back to that word I used earlier about learning. when you think about it, the value that we provide is to learn more than our clients can about the technology and how it can be deployed and used and create real outcomes. And I think this legacy to modernization cycle that's been going on for the last 35 years in the industry, we've got to break out of that and start doing more innovation and start doing more real business outcome stuff at the top end, above the infrastructure. And I think that's where we're trying to break out and start doing more on the how do you get the business more efficient, how do you play to what I guess a CFO's agenda is in terms of efficiency and cost management, and how much money are we spending on technology and what's the real return on that. Those have always been discussions, but it's getting much more focused now because of things like software automation, and that's where you can see dramatic changes in efficiency, but also quality. That's the other bit that is kind of missed in this discussion. It's not just about money saving; it's about the quality of management of that infrastructure or whatever it is you're doing through autonomous software is dramatically better. And when you supplement that with what great people around the edges are doing with that, you can then really accelerate those relationships with your customers. That's the bit that we're trying to get to. So we spent a lot of time learning about how you do it to ourselves. There's also a general fear of being disrupted.
Yeah.
For all of us.
You've been taken out.
Well, and unless we're pushing ahead and trying to do things new and creating better outcomes for our clients, but also more efficient outcomes for us, somebody will do it better than us. And it won't be anybody necessarily in this part of the world. It could be anywhere in the world doing it, because it'll be dropped in from a cloud service or whatever, right? So, but ultimately it's about whether our real value and all our people value is about whether we can learn more or keep ahead of that curve, that concept of seeing around corners. Can we keep ahead of that technology, keep ahead of where the vendors are going? Where most companies that we work with, I mean, they've got great IT people and they can't keep up with it all. So our job is to stay as close to the front of that as possible.
Innovation. People talk about innovation, and I get a lot of candidates come to me now and say, well, if they're not innovating, I don't want to join them. What's your view on if a company's just selling kit? Do you think kit's dead, or do you think if you're just selling kit, there's a future for it?
It's not dead, but you have to be very, very efficient at that, right? And have the value proposition has got to be absolutely nailed. Otherwise, you're going to get out, pushed out of the conversation. So no, I don't believe that any of those areas are dead. I think they're all transforming. They're all changing. We do a lot of fulfillment technology through Microsoft and HP and Dell and everybody else. It's just part of that basket of support, if you like, to what they're trying to do, the client's trying to do. I think more and more, though, our job is to help them see what's new in some of this technology. For instance, in the mid-market, classically today, there's not many companies talking about automation, right? It seems it's typically a big global account thing, lots of global banks, and spending a lot of time with companies like Blue Prism. In the mid-market, it's really not happened yet. And in the way we describe it is that we are, we've started off being unconsciously incompetent. And that's probably where most boardrooms are. They don't know what they don't know. And because nobody's talking about it. I mean, if they're asking for technology, they already know about it, right? But what they don't know is the bit that we have to help them understand, and what can be done and what's being done in your industry. So the referenceability, the verticalization of the market, all those things. Those are the really important things, because that can show real innovation, real discussions with part of the organization that wants to learn. So I think that's the key for us, is to keep ahead of that learning curve and make sure that from an innovation perspective, we're kind of making ourselves and everybody around us consciously incompetent, right?
Yeah.
What are the bits that we need to work on? Where are the areas that are at risk for us if we don't move fast enough in certain areas?
I had Alex Tatham on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about when I actually mentioned the word value add, and he hated it. He said, I don't like the word value added, Mark. It's just an excuse for distributors, and I'll throw in resellers as well, to raise their prices, and we should be taking cost out of the supply chain, not putting in it. How would you describe value add, or how does Ultima actually perceive them as value add to the market?
Well, ultimately, the value is determined by the client, by the customer, but what they see as value. That can be efficiency around supply chain. It can be efficiency in all sorts of different areas. It can be IP from specialist knowledge, learning, understanding how to apply. It can be referencing. This is how this technology is being used in other areas. All those things. So there's a whole spectrum of value that can be created. I think it depends on who you're talking to. One of the challenges we all have as an IT industry is that we're very comfortable with tech people and tech discussions. We're not so comfortable with CFO discussions or CEO or line of business or whatever it might be. And more, they're the ones determining what the strategy of their technology is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the bit that we've got to try and bridge. So, if I talked about that legacy to modernization loop that we've all been doing forever, to break out of that, to get to an innovation discussion, we're using automation and some of this newer software technology, because that takes you into another discussion, right? It takes you into a more innovative discussion. So, but if we were saying just you want to buy more of this kit or more of this software, that's not really innovative. That's an efficiency supply chain thing. So we need to do a bit of both. And I think I think there's this concept of taking these innovative ideas to the board is a big challenge. I think it's hard. It's really hard to do. We could literally fill Wembley with people that want to turn up and listen to us talk about automation and robotics and whatever other buzzword there is in the industry under this concept of intelligent automation or smart software. AI is the topic of the day. What does that mean, right? It just is smart software doing something that might be useful to you from a business perspective. So, but we're not an educator. We need to go and deliver stuff and make it work. So our job is to make sure that we are providing the value at the right level to the right parts of the organization. That's the bit that's hard. It's how do you split it all up? Who wants to know what? But as I said to you, more and more CFO discussions are driving a lot of that innovation.
And when you go into a new customer or an existing customer, do you lead with that automation piece, or how do you actually lead the conversation to actually talk about what they should be doing?
Well, we have a wide customer base, and indeed when we and there are different levels of engagement with all of those. I think when we talk about new is typically around some of this newer technology where we're playing a different story about how we can talk to them about innovation around automation or whatever it be, just to get them into the conversation. That works, and then we've got all the other things to show them in terms of our business portfolio. So it's a bit of everything, but the real stories are coming out of some of the newer things that we've developed. So we developed a piece of software in the last year, which is we've got a patent, so our first ever patent as a business for a piece of software that essentially does RPA, or robotic process automation, through Citrix or Microsoft remote desktop environments. And it's a unique piece of software developed by some of our best and brightest technology guys, and they've created something because they understood the infrastructure of things like Citrix and Microsoft, and also we enabled them to go and create stuff using RPA, and they built this on the back of that because there was a big problem. It was an issue that needed to be resolved, so they wrote software to fix it. And that's being used now with Blue Prism and a bunch of other partners out there, and we're starting to see real traction on that. And we'll continue to look at how we develop real IP in some of these areas to try and create differentiation and real value for us. That's what our job is. In fact, I'd argue that's what all partners' job is to create IP and value, right? Differentiate by doing different things or creating real answers to real problems.
So if a vendor wanted to come to Ultima, or they're dealing with Ultima at the moment, and they want to get, obviously all vendors want to get their product out as much as possible. Scalability we talked about earlier, as much scale as possible. If they want to get their product out, how can they get into Ultima or on your sales floor? Is it training days, or is it floor walks? How do they actually get more kit out into the market? And or get you to sort of make sure that you're pushing their product over a competing product.
Yeah. Well, I guess we have a lot of that stuff goes on in our core business, and we continue to invest in that, and we continue to have vendors support us and drive learning days and all sorts of stuff. In many ways, it's kind of reversed almost, because we have something called a tech review board, but that's really about our smart architects and consultants who actually come up with we've got an issue in a customer environment. We need a piece of technology to do this. Let's go and find it. So many times we're actually going out to find security.
So you'd go out proactively, go and find a vendor that does it.
Well, we'll research it, right? We'll research it and say we're missing. So we've just set up a partnership with a company called RedScan. So RedScan is a partner of ours now. They have a kind of automated platform for SIEM and SOC and pen testing and all those kind of things. And that fitted perfectly in our strategy of what we're doing with autonomous cloud and edge and autonomous networking. And so we had this bit in the middle that we wanted to go and partner with. So we're working with them on how we embed that into our sort of automation story. And they were very open. They're a very partner-centric company, and we're working with on that. So we kind of found them as much as they found us. So we went out to talk to them and analysed who's in this space, who can we work with.
Is that unusual though? Because normally the vendors are coming to you and saying, well, look, can we come in and have a pizza day or training day and then pushing out some product? Does that happen now?
Typically, so we segment our vendors into kind of strategic and tier one and all that kind of area, and so but it's a big investment, as you know. I mean, to get accredited, to have the technical depth, whatever it might be, you've got to put a lot of time and money into it, and you can't do hundreds of those things. I mean, we have lots of vendors in our portfolio, but we're trying to go deeper and wider with ones that really are able to take our innovation platform and drive it forward. So we have a wide set of partnerships, but I think relatively speaking, we go out and find them now rather than they find us. We're always doors open to listen and hear, but the decision to go and the decision to make that investment is a big one.
Yeah. What would convince if a vendor did come to you? What would be the decision process whether you took them on or not? Would it fit into your portfolio, or is it actually it's a product that can fit into our customers, or what would it be?
It's where it fits. It's
right.
where it fits in the offering. I think if it fits, as I say, there are plenty of holes in everybody's strategies. If it fits something, it's a new piece of technology, or it's just a more advanced version of something we already do, then we'll always look at it. But it's got to be about the value creation for the client and for the customer. So as if that's clear, and we think there's some real value to it, and there's some, to some extent nowadays, some kind of automation or cloud-based service that can be deployed, then we'll have a very good discussion.
Okay, great. In terms of the channel itself, tech is moving at a rate that no one can keep up with it. It's we said earlier, it's changing every 6 months. You train one guy on one thing, 6 months later it's obsolete because they're not using it anymore. What do you think can be done to make the channel more efficient and more collaborative? Because there's a lot of whispers in the market about there's not enough trust, there's not enough collaboration, there's not enough efficiency in the channel of actually people partnering. So we're saying we're partners, but we're vendors going direct and cutting out deals. In your opinion, how could we make the channel more effective?
Well, I think it's a blend of all the things we talked about. I think ultimately people's skills are still hugely valuable and hugely important. I'm going about automation, software defined everything. That will take a lot of the grunt out of the, let's call it less valuable things that we do with people today. But layering on really smart skills is still the key, it's still the differentiator. And I think we call that cobotics now. So you pair up really smart people with really smart software, you get this massive kick in productivity and effectiveness. And that's what we're all trying to do, is to try and blend those things together. So we're not doing away with people, we're just making it more efficient and more focused on real added value, which can be customer engagement, customer sat, it can be whatever, level 3, 4, escalations and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the basic running of the business from an infrastructure perspective is going to be more and more software led. So it's what's the value. So to your point about partnerships, I think the P2P stuff, the partner to partner stuff, has been around for a long, long time now. And actually, the world is much more, what I was going to say, cooperative. Is that a word? This co-opetition thing is kind of natural now. Microsoft are a perfect example of that. They used to hate, Apple and everything. Now they just work with anyone and everyone under Nadella's stewardship, and look what they've done to their business. Yeah. So I'm not sure this concept of competing. Of course, there are always challenges particularly with partners and smaller partners and who owns the customer and all that stuff. But I think it's about where the value is, right? Who's providing which value. So when we do partnerships, so that one I just mentioned, RedScan is a partner, but they're kind of vendor-like to us because they're building a software platform that we can help and build and integrate into what we're doing with autonomous cloud. And so they are. They're potentially a competitor, but they're not, because we're working collaboratively. We're open. We've got a lot of good dialogue between me and their CEO, and it's working, right? So I think we just have to be a bit more mature as an industry. I think it's the days of us fighting everyone, and as long as the value proposition is clear to the customer base and the clients, then I think everybody's happy. It's when it breaks down, then you've got to worry about how you get out of it.
Okay, great. At Ultima, I think it's documented and it's well known that you take pride in your development of your staff and the well-being of your staff, and that you think that's linked to sort of the quality of service that you offer. What have you done in your tenure to sort of implement that in the business?
Well, we're constantly looking at how we, basically improve the environment, if you like, for our people. I think, I said to you that, you boil it all down. Doesn't matter what great software and everything else. It's just about the people. It's always about that. And we have some of the best and the brightest in the industry, we think, right? Everyone thinks that, but we definitely do. Making sure, in many ways, it's keeping them ahead of that learning curve, right? How do we make sure that they have an environment where they get the best of everything, they get the best support, they've got a nice working environment, we've got lovely buildings and Reading and all these things. Our benefits need to constantly be improved. We're doing that on a quarterly basis now. We're just trying to make the environment.
On a quarterly basis, you're looking at
reviewing everything. Yeah,
really,
yeah.
That often.
Yeah. Well, we're adding to bits. We're adding little bits. We keep. I put out a quarterly or monthly update, and so as the start of this year, we haven't talked about our new ownership with private equity and Apps Capital, but that's changed some things as well. We've got a much bigger focus on how we want to drive some of these new technology areas. So, but we haven't lost sight of the fact that we need to attract talent. But to be honest, to attract and keep talent nowadays, you've got to give them some freedom to innovate and learn and do new things. I mean, particularly in a tech environment, we have a lot of technical, very, very smart technical people. If we ask them to run the same playbook and do what they've been doing for many years, a lot of them will just glaze over. So introducing newer capabilities, new technologies, how do you innovate? Well, the software I've just described to you has been driven from the ground up. They've created it. Some of our best technical guys have created these software platforms for us. And that's what keeps them there, because they can continue to do new things and innovate and get the rewards for that. So that's really what it's about. And that's true of sales and marketing and every part of the business. We're trying to make sure that we give people the platform to grow. And it's not always easy. I mean, you can't always get it right. But I think, ultimately we talked earlier about it, but I think it's about finding people that have, the right stuff. It's the people that you can bet on, that, if you're not watching them and looking at them because the world is more dispersed and we're all remote workers now and all these things, do you trust them? And do they trust us to do the right thing?
If you were going to give some interview tips for someone who was coming to see yourself and they were a salesperson, what would you say for them to impress you at interview? What are you looking for?
So you kind of get a sense, as we all do, within a few minutes of whether how the person ticks. I think ultimately I want to be able to trust them, and they need to trust us. So high integrity is key for me, but also this ability to learn. Right? Are they able, or they have a desire to learn? So if they come and talk to me, and I meet a lot of the ones that are being recruited across the business. If they don't know what we're doing, or indeed where we're going, and they haven't bothered to learn on that, that's a big sign to me. Right? Yeah. And I think, so I don't expect them to know what's going on in the world of robotics and all the details or whatever, but I want them to have an interest. I want them to show that they're up on it. They see us as a way of helping build a more interesting and innovative career with us. All those things. That's the bit that has to come out, rather than I've done this and I used to do that and I've done that in the past, and the past doesn't really interest me. It's an indicator of capability, but it's not what I need for the future. So it's how do I get that? What's
your view on book of business? So resellers are always asking me, we've got to have a book of business, or they've got to have a black book of contacts they can go and go and sell into straight away. And when I speak to most candidates, yes, they might be doing XGP and they've actually got a book of companies they can call into, but most of them can't transfer it. They might be able to transfer 20 or 30%. So what's your view on that in the market? Is it realistic now that someone can transfer their whole book, or is it something you'd look for?
Well, I mean, a lot of people will tell you that. I mean, in reality, it doesn't happen very often, and it's really only the best and strongest that can even do a percentage of that. I think in reality, as we discussed earlier, I think that contractually and all sorts of things are all sorts of blockers. At the end of the day, it's about being great networkers and have great integrity and trust and relationships with the people that they work with, their clients. And it can happen, but we wouldn't rely on it, but we would want to be able to understand how they build the networks, how they manage their relationships. I mean, a lot of our best account directors and account managers have got networks of people that they've been working with for years, right? And they just expand, they leave and move, and it's a massive opportunity. But that only comes because they trust them, and ultimately they trust the company that they're working for. And so that you can't lose that integrity piece. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll drop everything and move it all. But of course, you want them to show that they can, because many times when people are moving to companies like ours and many other types of partner in the industry is because we add something different to them, right? They've gone as far as they can go, or the company has a particular strategy in a certain area, but they don't have any of the other stuff that they want to do. So we're just giving them the chance to go and do some new things and have lots of technical backup to doing those things and support them. That's really all we're trying to provide, is a platform for them to be able to drive their business.
To be successful, yeah, absolutely. We had Graham in the studio last week, and who talked us through the big sleep out, which I know you took part in. And they raised over £100,000.
120, I think.
120, yeah, fantastic. So it does sort of show what the channel can do when they sort of pull together.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're looking at for next year, or would you be recommending for someone to do that themselves?
So I was talking to Graham last night. Actually, we were out.
He's roping you into something else.
Well, yeah, he roped us into this one, so we still haven't forgiven him. But no, actually, it did open our eyes. It was a hard night actually, and I remember with Sarah Shields and Angela Whitty, we're all out there with
Stuart
us.
Fenton was out.
Stuart was there, and it kind of opened our eyes a lot, and it was a pretty horrific experience actually. It was raining and horrible, but one of the commitments. In fact, I got a mail from Angela just last night actually saying they're going to do a kind of a meeting where all of us get together and do a bit of a brainstorm on how we could do more of an industry-wide thing. So there's something happening in the next month or so.
Fantastic.
And we're going to try and do something much more, cross-industry. Get you guys into it or whatever. You can sleep on the streets. Brilliant, but I'm not sure that. I certainly know that Angela and Sarah Shields will not be doing the little Lying on the Street thing again. We've done that one, but there are plenty of other things we can do. But when the industry is massive. It has all sorts of different funding mechanisms and give backs and kind of CSR things going on. If we actually put it all together, we could put millions into certain parts of the charity.
Which should be fantastic.
Which would be amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
And we should be, to be honest, should be doing it really.
Yeah, absolutely. My last couple of questions: the Channel Awards. Now, I know you've won Reseller of the Year before, etc. Do you put lots of value in trying to get one of those awards, or do you just see it as sort of a badge collecting exercise, or is it good for the employees? Why do people go in for it?
I think it's a lot about the employees, actually. It's about recognition for them, which is really the key, I think. I mean, a lot of people collect a lot of glass. It says something about their ability to manage the business. I think it's nice. I don't think it's absolutely vital, but I do think it's certainly a good selling point internally for attraction of talent. At least it opens up the question: why did you win it? What are you doing? Why did you get that as opposed to somebody else? So that's a good thing. It just starts another conversation. And I'm not sure our client base. I think things like the Reseller Awards and other things are kind of more industry related. I think there's some other things like we won Worldwide Citrix Partner of the Year and things. That means something. When you win that from a big vendor like Citrix, that's a huge statement of capability, and that's very important for us. But the pure kind of partner thing is just nice to have, but I think it's more to do with the recognition for the teams. I think it's a great fillip for them to say, wow, we actually won something and we're actually doing quite well. Because sometimes you don't know, do you? I mean, sometimes you're just ploughing your furrow and you think you're doing a good job, but you don't always get a lot of feedback. Yeah, and
it's a good night as well. It's always a good night.
It's always a good night. Yeah.
Messy night. Yeah, it's always a good night.
Yeah.
In terms of the next 18 months, 2 years, where do you see the market going in general, and also where do you see Ultima going in the next sort of 18 months, 2 years? I know we talked about that innovation piece and that we're going to be following that, but in general, where do you see it going?
Well, I think the speed will get faster. I think we're all going to have to watch much more carefully what's happening in the vendor world, because the way that they fund the channel, support the channel, those things change all the time. I think it's that piece about seeing around corners. What is it? What's the next big thing? Where should we be investing our time and resources? Because we make decisions. You talked about bringing new vendors on, but even with existing vendors, we're making bets and decisions on where we put our technical accreditations and resources and sales and marketing or whatever. these are big bets. These are not things you do lightly.
And how often do you analyze that? Or actually we're not sure about this. Is it reviewed quarterly, or how do you do it?
Well, the components of the technology are reviewed kind of on a monthly basis, really, about that's that piece about whether we need to find a piece of technology or find a partner or a vendor or whatever. That's just constantly going on. The big buckets that we have in terms of our business practices. So core infrastructure around data center, core workspace, core security and assurance compliance, all those things. Those are still big buckets and big topics, and they just keep rolling on. I think we're adding this layer of automation, this layer of software delivered in there. Well, that'll get louder and louder over the next year or so. We will develop more of our own technology as we go forward. Our relationship with Apps Capital, who acquired us back in 6 months ago now. That we'll be looking at M&A. We'll be looking at all sorts of things going forward. Okay. So it's kind of exciting, time ahead. But those are big decisions as well about what we're adding to the portfolio. Does it make sense in terms of technology that we're bringing in, or just scale, or whatever it is. So all those things will be on the agenda for us for the next 6 months, 12 months.
Great. And my last question, Scott. Many people out there and listening will be looking at yourself and thinking, right, I'd love to have Scott's career. He's a CEO of a well-known VAR, well successful company, and he's got the top job. But you started in inside sales and distribution. Yeah. So if someone's in inside sales and distribution, or they're a contributor or a manager, and they wanted to make a name for themselves or even emulate your career, what bit of advice would you give them to make a name for themselves in the IT channel or in our market?
Well, I think it's back to, I'm going to repeat myself a bit, but it's about that willingness to learn, do something different. We use the expression that, in terms of our people development, about growth hurts, right? So you have to be put in very uncomfortable places. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, which is a bit ironic, but or counterintuitive. But that's the truth. We want to be able to put people in places where they naturally will feel uncomfortable, because that's the only way they're ever going to grow and learn. That's kind of what I tried to do, put myself in test myself. And I never knew if it was going to work or not, and probably didn't for a lot of times, and I kind of went backwards. But I think it's about wanting to do something different, but you can't just say you want to do it. You've got to be all in. You've got to decide whether you're all in, and that's an energy thing ultimately. Have you got the energy for it? Are you prepared to put the extra time and extra miles in and do things that are somewhat uncomfortable, that you're not used to or you don't like doing? Yeah. Because then they become comfortable after a while, which is just what an athlete does when they get tired and muscle sore and everything else. That's where you grow, right, and get fitter. It's the same in business. You've just got to do things more often and learn, but also got to take an enormous amount of feedback, which is the authenticity bit. You can't just do it and ignore people around you and shout and scream and all those things. So empathy, I think, is massive. Great.
Scott, you've been a great guest. The last question I need to get from you, obviously I got recommended you from Nigel Dunn, said to get you on the show, and obviously Stuart Fenton tried to get you on the show. Yeah. Is there two people that you think the listeners would get a lot out of who you could recommend for us?
Vendor or channel or both?
And
so
anyone...
I've given you two there. So Sarah Shields at Dell and Angela Whitty at Cisco, they're great people. You get fantastic insight and stories out of them. Also from a diversity perspective, which is always a challenge for the industry. So I'd pick some great female talent actually out there, which I'd put those two highly up the list.
I think Sarah we've got coming on.
Yeah, she's coming in soon.
Angela will be out from, so we'll see if we can speak to her.
Yeah, Angela's brilliant. Yeah,
brilliant. Scott, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.